Lamar back again with another video. So in today's episode, I'm going to be covering all of the projections, odds, spreads, everything that you need to know about today's Sunday and Monday games. So kicking us off on our journey here, we have the New York Giants at Green Bay. This is the London game. It's going to be starting here in about like an hour and a half or 2 hours. I'm recording this at 6:30 in the morning Central Time, so I'm trying to get this out as soon as possible. Green Bay's favored 7.5. I think that they go ahead and cover this line. It's an over/under of 41.5. I have this hitting the over. This is one of the lowest over/unders on the entire week, and for good reason. I really don't think that the New York Giants are going to be bringing a whole lot to the table. If you have Saquon Barkley, go ahead and play him. Green Bay's rush defense has not been spectacular so far this season. On the Green Bay side of the ball, you really have a struggling offense who really doesn't know who their number one wide receiver is right now. I think the most promising wide receiver that they have is Romeo Doubs. However, it does seem like they're trying to make Alan Lazard and even Christian Watson their number one, number two, and Romeo Doubs is more of like a fill-in start player. That being said, I think Romeo Doubs is probably the most talented. He has never squandered any of the opportunities that Aaron Rodgers has given him, and Aaron Rodgers really doesn't do that for rookies. So I think you need to go ahead and they need to go ahead and make a decision here because they have a very talented wide receiver in Romeo Doubs, and I think that he needs to be given a second chance or another look to see if he's actually a wide receiver one on this team. Next up here, we have Detroit at New England. So I actually have Detroit winning this game as an upset. New England is favored by 2.5. I don't actually see this being covered, obviously, because I have Detroit winning. And then it's a 46.5 point over under. I think that this one actually hits the over, especially if Amon-Ra St. Brown is healthy. We've already gotten news that DeAndre Swift is out. So I think that Jamal Williams owners, I mean, if you want to go ahead and play him, you can, but there's probably better options out there this week. New England has had a pretty good defense so far this season, and Detroit has really kind of liked to air it out. I don't think Jared Goff is a bad play by any means, but I think that there's better quarterbacks out there this week as a whole. You can end up seeing a couple of interceptions and then maybe a lower passer yardage on today's game for Detroit, but I do have Detroit winning this game on the road, so go ahead and take your own risks. Now we go to the Chargers at Cleveland. I have the Chargers winning this one on the road. The Chargers are favored by 3.5. It's a 48.5 over under. I have it hitting the under, mostly because I don't believe in Cleveland's offense. Now, that being said, the Chargers defense has kind of had their ups and downs so far this season. They put a lot of money into that defense to try and be this all-world defense. However, it just really hasn't panned out so far yet this year. And I think that the Chargers end up getting a good amount of pressure on Jacoby Brissett, and they could force some bad decision making. Now, if I was a Nick Chubb owner, I would probably still play him because he's Nick Chubb. He's the number one running back in fantasy right now. But that being said, I'm a little worried. I think that you have a better option of upside with Kareem Hunt. I think that Cleveland's going to be trailing in this game quite a bit, and they might try and use a pass-catching back opposed to just a ground-and-pound type approach. Now, on the Chargers side of the ball, I think that Keenan Allen is already ruled out, so Mike Williams will be fine to play. That being said, Cleveland's secondary has been pretty good so far this season. Not great, but just like pretty good. And then you got Myles Garrett back. Jadeveon Clowney is questionable. If you haven't seen yesterday's episode about the injury report and whatnot, go ahead and check that out. Going over to Houston at Jacksonville. I have Jacksonville winning this one. It's a 7.5 point spread. I have Jacksonville covering this. It's a 44.5 over under, and I have it hitting the under here. Look, matter of fact is Jacksonville's defense has looked spectacular so far this season. They're 2-2, but that being said, in games that they were actually winning, they were shutting down the opposition. And even in the game against Philadelphia, they were out to a pretty commanding lead and then just kind of let Philadelphia get back into the game, and they ultimately just lost. I think Josh Allen on defense, it's really hard to say that because the quarterback, but Josh Allen on the defensive side of the ball for the Jacksonville Jaguars, I think he's been phenomenal in his role for that defense. And I think that Doug Peterson is doing a great job at managing all of the talented players in the team and not really squandering opportunities. James Robinson is a monster play this week. Houston is one of the worst teams in football against the run. On the side of Houston, I really don't want to be starting much of anyone. Dameon Pierce owners have had the luxury of playing him the past 2 weeks and getting moderate success, sometimes even better success than moderate. I don't think that's going to happen this week against Jacksonville. Jacksonville is going to win this game by 10 to 14 points, and I have it hitting the under, so that should tell you that I don't have a lot of onus or positivity surrounding the Houston offense. Okay, so now we go to Tampa Bay, and you have Atlanta in town. So it's Atlanta at Tampa Bay. I have Tampa Bay winning this one. It's a 7.5 spread. I have Tampa Bay covering this spread, and then it's a 48.5 over under. I have this hitting the under. I have zero confidence. I have more confidence in Houston's offense than the Atlanta offense. They're without Kyle Pitts. They have Drake London, I guess, but Tampa Bay's defense has been pretty phenomenal so far. It's not like phenomenal, I guess, but they have shut down teams quite a bit, forcing them to do whatever their weakest is. So if you have a good team that's running the ball, they try and force you to pass, and vice versa. So I think that Tampa Bay is going to get ahead early on this game, and it's just going to turn into a run-out-the-clock situation for Tampa. A lot of people want to say that Tom Brady's going to throw for like 4 touchdowns and whatnot. He could, but I think it's a higher probability that you might get a better game out of like a Leonard Fournette or Rachaad White. Probably Rachaad White is awesome this week, given the fact that this is going to be a blowout. Atlanta just doesn't have really any pieces to stop Tampa Bay. They do have, A.J. Terrell as the top corner, but so if A.J. Terrell is lined up against Mike Evans, he still has to end up guarding Chris Godwin and Julio Jones. You got Leonard Fournette coming out of the backfield. It's just too much for this Atlanta defense, and I think this game's going to get ugly pretty quick. Now we go over to Buffalo, where you have Pittsburgh at Buffalo. I have Buffalo winning this game. It's a 14.5 spread, and I actually have this one being covered by Buffalo. And then it's a 47.5 over under. I have it hitting the under. Look, the matter of the fact is that Buffalo is a pretty damn good team, and without TJ Watt on defense, the Steelers have been kind of lackluster. They do have Fitzpatrick, who's been pretty great, but outside of him, there's really nothing to write home about on that Steelers side. So Buffalo is going to destroy this team. Pittsburgh struggled last week to get the ball moving. They struggled so much that they actually benched Mitch Trubisky, and then they gave Kenny Pickett his first start of his career, and he threw 3 interceptions. So if you have Buffalo defense, I think this week is a phenomenal week. They're in Buffalo. You got the Bills Mafia out there. They're really going to try and bring it all against this Pittsburgh team. Buffalo 14.5. And like I said, I have it hitting I actually have this being covered here. I think that Stephon Diggs is awesome this week. You have Dawson Knox, who's been ruled out of the contest. I think Gabe Davis is probably okay. Isaiah McKenzie is questionable for the time being. So I think Isaiah McKenzie is actually going to be playing in this game. And I don't really see that having too much of an impact on Diggs, but more so on Davis. Devin Singletary is okay as well. Like I said, I think this game's going to get ugly quick. So you could end up seeing the Zach Moss show out of the backfield. So it's something to be careful about. Now we have Miami at the Jets, and you guys are going to think I'm crazy here, but I'm going to take the Jets here. I really have little confidence in this Miami offense. You have a banged-up Jalen Waddle playing. You have a Tyreek Hill banged up playing. I don't think that this team's going to be fun to watch with Teddy Bridgewater under center. It's going to be one of those games where whatever you think is going to happen is probably not going to happen. Miami has not been great against the pass. Like they've pretty much done whatever they need to on the ground, but when it comes through the air, they've kind of struggled quite a bit. Their biggest thing is that they let teams score a ton on them because they can also do the same. Well, I don't think that's the case this week, and the Jets are capable of getting into the end zone. I think that if you have a Garrett Wilson, he's phenomenal this week. If you have a Corey Davis, he's going to be a sneaky start. And then Breece Hall actually should be okay as well, catching a few passes here and there. And then on, obviously you have Tyler Conklin too. It's easy to forget that name because it's a new up-and-coming name right now. He was on the Vikings last year, and this year he's really kind of found a new home in New York, playing phenomenal. I think he's like a top 10, top 5 tight end on the year just because of all the targets that Joe Flacco was peppering him with. And Zach Wilson still targeted him 5 times last week, so I think that Tyler Conklin's completely fine. Miami 3.5 spread. I do not have that being covered, obviously. And then 44.5 over under. I have this hitting the over. Look, as much as I want to shit on the Dolphins offense, I really do think that the Dolphins are capable of scoring. I just don't know how and how often, so I'm just trying to stay away at all costs. Chicago at Minnesota. So I have Minnesota winning this game. Minnesota 6.5 point spread. I actually have Minnesota covering this one, and it's a 43.5 over under, and I have it hitting the under. Look, I'm talking about it all week. I'm going to the game. I got my Bears jersey on. It's Khalil Mack. Yeah, sorry, I'm not going to spend up on a jersey right now for a team that is awful. But I think that Minnesota is going to run away with this game. Chicago, man. It's tough to say what's going on there. You got a new head coach, and you still have Justin Fields, who's very, very talented. He's just misutilized. Every week, his pass attempts have gone up and up. So they are easing him into more of a heavy passer than what he had been, but he's still throwing some of the fewest pass attempts on the season. If you looked on paper, a year from now, you would think that he was playing in a bunch of monsoons because of how bad his stat line is. And that's not the case. I think that this team needs to figure it out. Saw a promising week last week with Darnell Mooney. I would not go ahead and chase this. If you have the Vikings defense, I think they're awesome this week. Whoever's going to be starting for the Bears out of the backfield, I think is an okay start. Minnesota has not been great against the run, but through the air, I don't see Justin Fields doing much with that. So that's why I'm kind of out on there. On the Minnesota side of the ball, Justin Jefferson's going to be great. Adam Thielen's going to be great. And Dalvin Cook is going to be awesome. If Dalvin Cook does not have a breakout game this one, I think you can start sounding the alarm, because Chicago is one of the worst, if not the worst team against stopping the run. I think they actually are at 32nd. So that's saying something. If Dalvin Cook cannot get something going here, I'm really, really concerned for the outlook on Cook this season. Tennessee at Washington. I have Washington winning this game. Tennessee 2.5 point spread. I do not have this one being covered. And then 42.5 over under. I have this hitting the over. I am actually starting Carson Wentz in a lot of fantasy lineups this week because of the fact that he is so cheap on FanDuel. FanDuel right now, he's like 6,800, one of the lowest guaranteed quarterback ones on the week. He has had two really bad back-to-back weeks here, getting like 8 points 2 weeks ago and then 9 points last week. I think that he's going to have an awesome week this week against Tennessee, who's not been great against the pass. You got Terry McLaurin. I have Terry McLaurin having a big game, over 100 yards. And then I also have Curtis Samuel getting more involved out of the backfield like he was before. Brian Robinson is getting activated off of the injury report, or the injury reserved, after being shot before the season started. So he's going to make his debut this season. I don't know what that means, because he could end up getting like 2 snaps. He could end up getting 5. Really don't know. I think that I'm very concerned if I'm an Antonio Gibson owner, and I'm even more concerned if I'm a J.D. McKissic owner. So I think you can tread on the path of caution here and do not play Brian Robinson this week. Do not play Antonio Gibson this week, but you can play McLaurin, Samuel, and then I'd also say Logan Thomas is pretty great if he plays. He has a lingering calf issue right now, and so if he doesn't play in this game, I think that Terry McLaurin's even better. Same thing with Samuel, but if not, then I think Logan Thomas is a really good start at the tight end position, and then temper expectations for your Samuel. I think McLaurin is going to be fine regardless. Now, on the other side, you got Tennessee. They just lost Treylon Burks to IR. So I really think that Robert Woods, Westbrook-Akine, and then Kyle Phillips are really your only options here at the wide receiver room. And I think that Robert Woods, given his veterancy, that he will probably emerge as the number 1 wide receiver on this team. Doesn't mean he's the most talented, but I think that this team really does just want to utilize the talent where they can. So I don't see this team being super great. Derrick Henry could have a good game. He could not. Really don't know with him right now. He's had 2 back-to-back really great weeks, but it could end up coming to a crashing halt here on the road. Seattle at New Orleans. I have Seattle winning this game. New Orleans has a 5.5 spread. I do not have that being covered. And then a 44.5 over under. I have this hitting the over. I think this game is going to be a lot closer than people think, and I actually have Seattle winning it. So, look, New Orleans has not been super impressive so far this season. Alvin Kamara has not really been playing because of injury. He's expected to play today, but I don't really know what to expect there because in the games where he did play and was healthy-ish, he really was not super productive. You have Jameis Winston, who's ruled as doubtful, probably going to be out. And then you got Andy Dalton throwing the ball. You got Michael Thomas, who's already been ruled out. Chris Olave, you want to go ahead and say, yeah, of course I'm going to play him. But Andy Dalton's throwing the ball. I don't really have a ton of confidence in Andy Dalton. Over on Seattle's side, they're really starting to figure this out. Geno Smith has looked pretty good so far this season. DK Metcalf had a monster week last week. I think that is not going to happen this week against Marshawn Lattimore. Last year, they kind of got into it, and it seems like DK Metcalf and Mike Evans both have a grudge against Marshawn Lattimore, and probably the same for him. Now, if you have Tyler Lockett, I think Tyler Lockett's actually a good play this week, given what I just said about DK Metcalf and Marshawn Lattimore. So I think that if you have Tyler Lockett, go ahead and play him with pretty good confidence. As far as the running game, I have zero confidence. You had Rashad Penny go ahead and have a monster week last week, but that's just not going to be repeatable against this New Orleans defense. San Francisco at Carolina. I have San Francisco winning this game. San Francisco 3.5 point spread. I have them covering this, and it's a 39.5 over under. I have it hitting the under. It's the lowest over under on the week, and I have it hitting the under primarily because Carolina's offense is so freaking bad. I think that this is probably Matt Rule's last game as a NFL head coach, and it could possibly be Baker Mayfield's last game as a starting quarterback for the Carolina Panthers. This San Francisco defense has looked great against pretty much everything. They have answers for whatever you dial up, and it seems like they're one of those teams that is actually legit. They haven't really given up more than 10 points in 3 of their games so far this season. So I think that you can play this San Francisco defense with a ton of confidence. They're probably going to be the number 1 defense on the week. They are on the road, so you could end up having something happen on Carolina's side, but I really do think this could potentially be a shutout or like a 3-point affair for Carolina. Christian McCaffrey owners, I'd almost say don't even play him this week if you have a better option, but by doing that, I don't know if I could honestly say that I would sit Christian McCaffrey just because San Francisco, I think Jimmy Garoppolo has a sub 200 passing yard day. I really don't think he's going to be needed a ton. I actually have San Francisco getting a pick 6 in this game. So whenever you have a defense that scores, that just takes a little bit more off of the offense from a point perspective and fantasy perspective. I don't think George Kittle finds his way in this game either. I think that Jeff Wilson Jr. is going to struggle against this really good rush defense. But then Deebo Samuel, I think, will be the main benefactor along with Brandon Ayuk. Philadelphia at Arizona. Philadelphia has a 4.5 point spread and a 49.5 over under. I have Philadelphia winning this game, covering the spread, and hitting the over. I think this is going to be a fun game to watch. I think Philadelphia is pretty much going to be in control this entire game, and I think Arizona is going to get some garbage time points. So I do think that there's going to be plenty of fantasy relevance in this game, but it's not going to be a fun watch from an Arizona perspective. You're going to see Philadelphia pretty much dominate this game. I would say play the Philadelphia defense if you can. However, it hasn't really panned out to be a great year so far for this defense. They've definitely held their own to keeping the opposition out of the end zone-ish. They looked great against Minnesota, but they give up points, so that kind of stinks. You'd like to see a shutdown defense be a little bit more shut down than what they have been. But that being said, Arizona is in shambles right now. They have no idea what their identity is. They don't know if they're a passing team or a running game because neither one has been phenomenal so far this season. Kyler Murray, who refuses to watch game film, has just not been great this year, so he's relying solely on talent and quickly realizing that it's the NFL and you can't just do that anymore, especially being sub 6 foot. Philadelphia side of the ball, I think that Devontae Smith has an awesome week this week. I think A.J. Brown has a down week. Against number 1 wide receivers, Arizona has been pretty good. Philadelphia out of the backfield, I think Miles Sanders is going to be awesome. I don't think that Arizona's stellar in hyphen or quotes is going to be anything that's great against this Arizona rush defense. So Miles Sanders is going to be great. I think that Dallas Goedert's going to be great, and Devontae Smith. Jalen Hurts, I'm a little worried about, given what I just said about Miles Sanders. Jalen Hurts gets a lot of his fantasy relevance by rushing touchdowns, and I think that Miles Sanders ends up getting those touchdowns this week. For our next game here, you have Dallas at Rams. So it is a 5.5 point spread for the Rams and a 45.5 over under. I have Dallas winning this game. I have the Rams not covering the spread, and I have this hitting the under. I think that Dallas's defense is going to do everything they can to shut down this Rams offense, and the Rams offense has not looked good so far. If your name is not Cooper Kupp or Tyler Higbee, you're not having a fun ride on this Los Angeles Rams team, and I don't think it's going to get any better against Dallas. The Rams have really, really struggled against pass rush, and that is arguably the best thing that Dallas does. So Micah Parsons is going to be all up in the face of Matthew Stafford all day long. I think that they get over 5 sacks this game. They probably get, a pick or two. And I think that Cooper Kupp still has a good game, but not by Cooper Kupp standards. I'm going to say he's probably going to get around 70-ish yards, and he's probably going to have like 8 receptions. Look, matter of the fact is, the way that he's being utilized on that offense, he's getting hyper-targeted. Great. If you're in a PPR format, you don't really care about like the yardage. But if you're in any other type of a format, he's only getting targets that are like 8 to 10 yards down the field. It's just like these quick little hitches or ins or outs. And so I don't have a ton of confidence in Cooper Kupp, at least this week. I think that the schedule does open up a little bit after this week. So brighter days ahead. But for this week, I'm just trying to steer clear of all people on the Rams side of the ball. Now, on the Dallas side of the ball, Cooper Kupp has actually looked really, really good. To say that is one thing, but to actually pick them as the winner in this game says a completely different thing. I think that Cooper Rush is awesome this week. I don't think that he's really someone that you have to be worried about necessarily. I think that CeeDee Lamb, Noah Brown, Michael Gallup, Ezekiel Elliott out of the backfield, Dalton Schultz, who was not targeted last week, I think that he's okay. There's a lot of weapons here on this Dallas offense, and I think the Dallas defense is good enough to not put a ton of pressure on Cooper Rush to have to compete in this game. Cincinnati at Baltimore. I have Cincinnati winning this game. It's Baltimore 3.5 point spread. I do not have that being covered, and that's a 47.5 over under. I have this hitting the over. Main reason here, Cincinnati has a pretty good track record against Baltimore. Baltimore does not have Rashad Bateman. They have Devin Duvernay, who has been a touchdown machine so far this season, and then Mark Andrews, who's had a bit of a down week last week, but was phenomenal the week prior. J.K. Dobbins is being eased back into the offense after tearing his ACL last season. He's now going to be on his 3rd game of this year, and he's looked pretty good so far. Scored twice last week. I think that he's an okay start this week, but Cincinnati Bengals have had a pretty good defense, and I'm a little worried for how the ball is going to be moving for Baltimore. Now, on the Cincinnati side of the ball, you have T. Higgins, who is expected to play in this contest. I think T. Higgins is awesome. He's a great route runner. He has awesome hands. He's got speed. He's got height. So I really do think that T. Higgins is going to be a week in and week out awesome play regardless of opposition. Jamar Chase has a little bit of a slower start than what we wanted, but he's going to have a pretty good game this game. Hasn't really been a Joe Mixon problem, but more so an offensive line problem. They really haven't been giving him the holes that he needs to run through. They're not getting downfield to get those blocks. They're just like getting too much pressure in the face of Joe Burrow. Joe Mixon doesn't have time. And so I don't think this is Joe Mixon problem. I just think that this team needs to tighten up a little bit on the offensive line, and you'll see Joe Mixon return back to form. For our last game here, you have Vegas at Kansas City. I have Kansas City winning this game. It's a 7.5 point over. It's a 7.5 point spread. I have Kansas City not covering this, and then it's a 51.5 over under. I have this hitting the under. I haven't seen enough from Kansas City to believe that they're this barn burner team. And the same goes for Vegas, both of which have a ton of options to throw the ball to. They have a ton of talent, but you really haven't seen that so far this season. Do I think that Devontae Adams is a great player? Obviously. Do I think that Darren Waller is an awesome player? Yeah, same thing for Travis Kelce and Juju, but I need to see more from both of these teams. I think that Kansas City squeaks out a win here, but I don't think it's going to be a fun game by any means to watch. Vegas's defense, at least from a pass rush perspective, has been pretty putrid. I would have thought that Max Crosby would have been a little bit better. So I don't know. I think that you have some optimism here, but realistically, I think that Kansas City's just too experienced in these type of games. I think Patrick Mahomes is 7-1 against Vegas, so I don't have a ton of confidence in Derek Carr to figure out this Kansas City defense. Josh Jacobs, I think, should actually be pretty fine. He's had 2 back-to-back weeks that were pretty great for fantasy, so I don't have a ton of worry about that. Okay, so now we go to the fun part of today's episode where I tell you all of the people that I think are going to be phenomenal this week for fantasy. Let's go ahead and start at the defensive side of the ball. So on defense, I think that your best starts are going to be Seattle, Dallas, and Minnesota. That being said, I also have a ton of confidence in Detroit, Miami, and the Giants. Outside of that, I really don't have a ton of confidence playing any other team. Seattle is going to be probably the sneakiest start this week. They're 3,100 on FanDuel, and New Orleans offense has not had a ton of scary things to look out for. With Andy Dalton under center, I think it just exacerbates that problem. And then I just talked about the Dallas Cowboys defense against this Rams struggling offense. At the quarterback position, I think that your best plays are going to be Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Zach Wilson, and Carson Wentz. A lot of people want Tom Brady to be in this list, but I'm leaving him out because I'm scared that this is going to be a blowout and then he's going to get fewer yards than what we wanted. He may get 3 or 4 touchdowns, but I think that for the price of him, there's just better options. I want to make sure that this is clear. A lot of this advice is coming from a DFS perspective, a daily fantasy sports, opposed to who you drafted for your fantasy team. That being said, you can still take this information and use it however you want. Now, Zach Wilson, I think, is actually fine. Like I said, I think the Jets are going to win this game. Miami has not been phenomenal, and they've like one of the worst pass defenses on the season. So I think Zach Wilson is going to be completely fine. Carson Wentz, I think, is going to be phenomenal against this Tennessee defense, who's given up a ton of points through the air. And then Jalen Hurts, like I said, I want to play him, but I just can't because, I want to play him, but I'm scared because of Miles Sanders vulturing those touchdowns out of the backfield. Kenneth Gainwell getting those touches out of the backfield. There's just too many different ways that this can go. Jalen Hurts is either going to have 35 fantasy points this week or 5. It's going to be really no in between. It's not going to be 5, but you know what I mean. It's going to be like 16 or 17, which is not great at 8,600 on FanDuel. So flipping over to the running back position, I have James Robinson. I've already talked about it. I think that he's probably going to be one of the if he's not the RB1 this week, I think he's the RB2 this week. He's going to have a phenomenal day against Houston as long as he stays healthy. Damian Harris, I actually have being the number 1 overall running back on the week this week against Detroit. I think that he's going to have absolutely an awesome game. Ramondre Stevenson, same game as Damian Harris. He's actually the backup. Ramondre Stevenson really hasn't had a breakout game so far this season, but he could end up getting quite a bit more touches here against Detroit if they get out ahead. Nick Chubb, I think, is going to be just fine against this Chargers defense. I don't want to target him from a DFS perspective, but from just like an overall fantasy perspective, you got to ride that hot hand. I think that Kareem Hunt is actually going to be a little bit funner play in this game, mostly because of his pass catching ability if they're down in these games. Dameon Pierce, I want to completely stay away from Dameon Pierce this week. He's had back-to-back really good weeks, but I think that comes to a crashing halt against this Jacksonville defense. Miles Sanders is probably going to be that running back 3 or 4 against this Arizona defense who really hasn't been able to stop much of anyone. From a wide receiver's perspective, I have T. Higgins, Garrett Wilson, Stephon Diggs, Devontae Parker, and Tyreek Hill as your best options. Now, let's go ahead and talk through that and why. Okay, so T. Higgins, I have it being phenomenal this week because of the fact that he really has been hyper-targeted from a Cincinnati perspective, and Baltimore has allowed a ton of points. I do not think that you have to worry about the Cincinnati offense scoring. Jamar Chase, also an awesome play in this game, but I think that T. Higgins has the edge. CeeDee Lamb, I think that is going to be an awesome play. He is getting so many targets with Cooper Rush at quarterback, and you're without Dak Prescott yet again. Robert Woods could be a sneaky play given how cheap he is in DFS. I think he's 5,900 on FanDuel, and he's going to be the wide receiver number 1 on this team, at least for this week. Chris Godwin's going to be just fine. I think Chris Godwin is also pretty cheap given where his value really does lie. Stephon Diggs, super expensive, but I think he's worth it against this Pittsburgh defense. And then Devontae Parker, it's a toss-up between Parker and Aguilar, who are both the receivers for New England. So it's kind of sucky because if Damian Harris has a good game, I don't think that Devontae Parker has a good game. If Ramondre Stevenson has a good game, I don't think that Aguilar has a good game. So, like, it's one of those things where you don't really know how this game's going to go. If I had to say what I'm most confident in, it's definitely the run here. I think that from a defensive perspective, whatever the Detroit Lions draw up, I think they'll have an answer to. Belichick's too good. And then for our tight end position, which will be the last one that we'll cover here, I have Logan Thomas as the tight end number 3 on the week. You have Dallas Goedert, who will be the tight end number 1. And then Tyler Conklin, who will be the tight end number 2. TJ Hawkinson is starred. That's only if Amon-Ra That is only if Amon-Ra St. Brown is held out of this contest. If Amon-Ra is in, then I am totally out on Hawkinson. I don't think there's a ton of options here this week at the tight end position that are actually start worthy. Now, I will say this, and I'm going to say it quietly so that way people don't really hear this part. But Jordan Akins on DFS for tight end position, he's playing Jacksonville this week. He got back-to-back good weeks, and he's only $4,400. I think that you could save a ton of money from a DFS perspective. Get him, and then you're able to afford guys like a Stephon Diggs. Stephon Diggs paired with a Damian Harris and a Josh Allen if you really, really wanted to. And then also, like I said, Seattle's defense is like one of the sneakiest starts at 3,100, the second cheapest on the week. I think there's a ton of options here where you can get kind of creative. And I'm going to call my shot on Jordan Akins scoring a touchdown this week. But as always, if you like today's content, feel free to like, comment, subscribe. It helps me out a ton. But I'll catch you in the next one. See you.